I'm John Gwynne. I've been coming down to help at Llangollen since 1976 is the first entry I find in my diary about helping. And I came down to help rebuild a railway. That's the way I see it. And I'm still here now. Haven't rebuilt a railway. But you've got to understand that when we first came to assist, they were lucky that the station hadn't been bulldozed down and made into a hotel. That was
Absolutely.
one thing, you know.
Yeah.
But there was no track. There was one 60-foot length of rail underneath the footbridge, with Austin one was on it even then, I think, yeah. And that was it. One length of track, 10 miles of ballast, as the Severn Valley Railways magazine put it, and they were quite right, 10 miles of ballast. And when we first turned up, we'd been helping at Oswestry on Foxcote Manor to restore that, and they'd come to the end of what we could physically do as youngsters with no engineers, no money really was the other thing. We needed money to restore the boiler. We didn't have it, so we're going to have to spend years fundraising. So on the way home that last day from Oswestry, we came through Llangollen. It's a winter's night. As we came over the town bridge, the light was on in the signal box. Well, what's going on here, you know? So go down, go into the signal box, and Medwin Roberts was sat there. The fire was going in the crates. I think he was pretending that the train was due for Barmouth or something, you know, but he was sat there, you know, we started chatting. He said, no, we're going to rebuild the railway. We said, we're starting to. And I think by that time they'd cleared the rubble from the platforms, which had been dumped. We're going to start rebuilding it, you know. So anyway, off we get in Dave Sutton's minivan, green minivan, 4 of us in the back, 2 in the front. Anyway, we were talking about on the way home, we said, oh, maybe we should go there. That's the next project. We'll go and help there, see what's going on. So we didn't come down the next weekend, like you, Pete. I think it was maybe a month later, I don't know. And we turned up, there was nothing happening. You know, it wasn't a huge gang of men with, you know, pickaxes, shovels, hammers, whatever. There wasn't. There was Len Binnersley, Di, who was the station master, and a couple of other people. Did we have any tools? No. We had sledgehammers. We had massive spanners that were so blinking heavy to lift you could hardly, you know, everything was heavy. And anyway, I don't even know what we did the first day. We just potted about. Can you help here? Can you help there? Yes, okay. But there wasn't really. I don't know whether you could describe it as rose-tinted glasses. Well, I don't think it was, because there was nothing. You went round the corner, there was nothing. The railway had gone. The track had been taken up. There was no rolling stock. There's hardly anyone. But for some reason, whatever we did that first day, as we drove home, we said, we've got to go back. They need our help. We've got to go back. And we did. And then we turned up on a Saturday, I think, Peter. Did you turn up on a Sunday? I can't remember.
I was more Sundays, because
yeah.
I played hockey on the Saturday. Yeah.
That's right. So they said, oh, there's these guys who turned up on a Sunday, but you're the Saturday gang. So, okay, so, and that's what we did. And it went on like that until we started. When did it start to actually snowball a bit? It was
late 76, early 77. We started getting track into the cutting in 77.
Yeah. I've got it off the track halfway down the platform. Now the track itself was not stuff you see if you go and look over the wall at Llangollen Station to this day. It was industrial track,
£75 flat bottom
dog rail
spiked.
on dog spikes.
8 dog spikes per sleeper.
It was the lightest stuff you could be. It was what we were given. It's the only thing we had. That's what we used.
It didn't cost us anything.
No, that's what we used. The local authority, the councillor, said that you've permission to lay the track, but if you lay a mile of track within 5 years, we'll give you a lease on the rest. So that's what we attempted to do. And the further we went out, the gang got a bit bigger, and we gelled together into one. So there were people to actually do the work. But it's extremely heavy work now. It was extremely heavy work then. We had no cranes, nothing.
No,
Just all right. We were
sleeper
younger, 50 years ago. Yeah, we were younger, but we had older people helping us even then.
very old. People.
But the thing was, we were there to rebuild the railway, to Corwin if we could get it there. It was going to be Carrick, then it was going to be Corwin, but to rebuild the railway. And the other thing that we have to remember that the Railway Society is very lucky in, the Dee Bridge was never dismantled.
Yeah,
The steel that's on the Dee Bridge, they could have taken it away, they didn't. So that came down to the local authorities' decision that they weren't going to do away with the infrastructure, because you've got other bridges and infrastructure that, had they filled in Berwyn Tunnel or something, we couldn't have done stuff like that. It's very lucky. The station buildings themselves here, Berwyn, in Dovedwy, Carrog, they were kept as they were. They became council houses basically, and the people then who owned them when we came along sold them into private ownership. So that's Berwyn Station is still owned by within the lease, I think, isn't it? You know, but it sort of it started to gel together, but quite why and how we maintained coming down here week in, week out, you know, when it was a bit grim at times, you know, and then you'd get the local people here, we'd be whacking dog spikes, bang, bang, bang on a Sunday afternoon. This man over the fence, will you please leave? I can't take this anymore. You're ruining my life, something. He was quite right.
Yeah, and Miss Armstrong by the station, she would always stand on her balcony giving us some verbal stick because of the noise, because obviously banging in metal spikes with sledgehammers does tend to make a little bit of noise, and bearing in mind that they'd enjoyed 10 years of peace and quiet, we come along with our hammers and start making massive amount of noise. She was not a happy bunny, and she'd stand there on the balcony glaring at us.
The only time
just smiled back.
The only time they got round her was Eisteddfod week, because a member of our group was a cameraman for Granada TV. Anyway, they needed a location to interview some people from the Eisteddfod, and they asked whether they could use her garden, because then she thought the road was okay then, because, you know, they
got involved.
Yeah, she was involved in something. She's not recently died, has she? Yeah, the house has been sold. The station master's house, which is the big white house here. But, you know, why did it work? Why did we stick? I don't really know. I had plenty of other interests that I could have gone off and done, you know. But we did. And we slowly gelled, and it was only when we actually started running trains, we had permission, and that's a story in itself as to how we came to, you know, get permission to actually run the service. The first day, did we take £750 in 50p's?
Yeah.
50p, have a ride up the cutting here. The thing was, see the beautiful Dee Valley by steam train.
And you got as far as Goods Junction.
In the cutting. You couldn't see anything at all, you know, yeah. But they queued up down the street here to have a ride. Some people actually asked for tickets to Barmouth that day. Well, you know, what do you mean you haven't laid? Well, no, it goes on. You've been here for 10 years. Well, why isn't it laid anymore? It was a bit mad, really, but people stuck. And in the end, we had people who had a bit of pull, a bit of weight behind them, to say, well, you actually need, I know someone who can help because he's got this here and come down. And it started to progress from that. But the initial setup and work, etc., was, there was nothing. Nothing.
No. Yeah. Well, my name's Peter Neve. I first came down to Llangollen 1975, having read in an in-house magazine published by my employer that there was a new railway going to be built at Llangollen, and I came down late 1975 with the expectation of seeing track and engines and carriages and all sorts. And when I came down, it was just a barren wilderness basically. And I made inquiries, and I was told to come back another week, which I did. There was still nobody here. They were all working at Shell, removing the track that Shell had donated because they were redeveloping part of their Stanlow refinery complex. So eventually I did come down when there were people working, and I knew nothing about track at all, but I was told to get on a sleeper tongue and move that sleeper there and another one there. And then I witnessed people driving in these dog spikes into the sole plates on the wooden sleepers, and realised it wasn't exactly rocket science. So I then started doing that myself, and that was the start of a career in permanent way. We did gel, as John said. There were the Saturday gang and the Sunday gang, and quite often we just didn't ever get to meet. And I think it was Eisteddfod Week 1976 where we all decided we'd take time off work to come down and try and make a push on the track. And I think most of us took 3 days of that week off, and that's when we got to know one another. That's when we got to meet. And we hadn't even laid track up to the footbridge then, but we laid enough to get Austin 1 moving up a short length of track, and the then Chief Mechanical Engineer Hugh Richards, he steamed up Austin 1 probably for the first time. It was certainly, from my recollection, the first time Austin 1 moved under its own power in preservation, and that was July 76. It didn't have vacuum brakes or anything. It just had its steam brake, and the vacuum brake came later, sponsored by Burton Wood Brewery, and hence the change of name to Burton Wood Brewer for a while. But the big problem was always the weight of the materials. Rail was always difficult to handle when you hadn't got anything mechanical, and it took about 8 of us on rail tongs to lift a 30-foot length of the flat bottom into place. And when you're young, you just take it as a given that you're capable of doing that. But as John said, there were older people there. Len Binnersley was ex-BI, he was a signalman, and he must have been in his 70s then, thereabouts. Yes, yeah. And he was helping out on the track. And
John Jones from John Knockin.
John Jones. But eventually it became apparent that we couldn't carry on working the way we did, because it was too it was beyond our capabilities to get all the equipment up to where we were working. Now, the equipment, such as it was stored in a room in the station building, and all we had was a trolley, 4-wheel trolley, which we would load up in a morning with the heavy jacks and the bars, shovels, etc., and we'd push that trolley up to the railhead, wherever that was. And well, we were working in the station compound or confines, it wasn't too much of a problem. But once we started working in the cutting, which is quite a gradient, there was a lot of effort just getting the trolley and the tools to where we were working. And eventually we decided that we needed wagons, and we had no motive power. A lease egg had arrived, but that had problems with its braking system. Burma arrived, and that didn't work. But Graham Ross, using his Royal Navy experience, got Burma going, and once we got Burma going, we had motive power. Then we were donated a wagon from Brumbo Steelworks, which came by road, and that allowed us to throw our equipment on. Then we bought a burnt out towed brake van from the Severn Valley, which came in 1980 as a sort of burnt out hulk, which we restored. And then we bought ourselves a box van from British Rail at the time. We came from Speke Junction, and all these wagons were purchased by virtue of donations from the P-Way lads. The railway didn't buy any of them. We raised the money ourselves, and I think we could get a box van for 300 quid in those days, and went round with a begging bowl, and we had a group of about 20 or so, and people would put in anything from £10 to £50, and once we'd got the Burma up and running, and the Burma wagon, the box van and the brake van, we were set up then.
Yeah, progress became quicker.
And we were able to drive the train up to wherever.
It's funny to think that when we didn't have anything, and we donated a wagon from Brumbo that we still have. It's in the yard at Pentrevellin, needs restoring. When it got delivered here to the yard, we'd all had a day off work, it was midweek sometime. And we could actually, the track went from the goods yard down to Goods Junction and then down to the station. So there was actually track there to move the wagon from the yard to the station. So that's what we endeavoured to do. Now this had been sat in Brumbo Works, not turned a wheel in probably years. So we're pinch barring it to try and get it to roll downhill, actually pinch barring it. And then when we got it over the point now, coming this way, plenty of oil, more oil, and there's 4 people around it, it actually started to roll of its own self, so okay, this is great. No, then it started to speed up. So at this stage, there's a school party with the school teacher walking along the platform here on a visit. And the school teacher, bless her, said to the children, now then children, one time in the future we're going to be able to come in, ride on a train that goes up the line. And some child said, well, here comes one now, missus. And this wagon came round the corner with us running behind it, trying to stop it. I forgot now, it burned it. I don't know what happened.
We got it over the crossover and at the top of the gradient, as you said, and we pinch barred it, and it started to gather pace. At that point, I jumped onto the brake bar, and it wasn't having a lot of effect, but it was biting slightly, but the momentum was gathering, and I was still hanging on to that wagon as we came into the station at probably about 20 mile an hour, and I thought, this is going to end in disaster. I'm going to end up in a heap underneath the bridge. I kept jumping up and down on this brake bar, and thankfully the gradient sort of leveled out, and I remember flying past this group of school children on the platform. Oh look, miss, there's a train coming through. I think if they'd have looked carefully, they'd have seen my white face and white knuckles as I was about to jump off, but I think I pulled up about the signal box or something like that, and it was a heart-stopping moment.
You've got to ask yourself why we kept on coming. Because people went. If you wanted to go for the glamour jobs, go to the Festiniog Railway. They got a proper railway that you can run and drive and fire engines. The Severn Valley was going. I think the motivation for here was we were rebuilding a railway. We were actually putting it back, and that got enough who were not bothered about what we were going to run on it when we put it back, because that's been an astonishing story anyway of what's actually run down here. We've had everything, but people were committed to actually rebuilding the railway. And considering the effort and the work, and it did slowly get easier because, bless him, Alan Hopwood, who's our P-Way engineer, bought a steam crane.
Yeah, SVR.
Was it Seven Valley, right?
Yeah.
So we had a crane. You had to boil the kettle to use the crane, but we had a crane. So we're up in the cutting doing some work one Sunday. I'm on the ground with the hook is here somewhere, and I'm feeding this thing up. I don't know what we were trying to do, but the hook comes up, and I'm like this. It's just, you can't just switch something to switch it off. It's a steam crane, so it takes time to do that. This hook comes up and hooks under my belt, right? And I'm yelling to them, stop, stop, stop. No, they lifted me up. I was like Peter Pan flying around with the hook stuck through my belt. I'm telling them to blinking put me down immediately. They're up on the cutting side in hysterics. Watching Peter Pan.
It was a hoot. It was potentially serious. And the problem was, being a steam crane, there was a lot of noise, hissing and so on. So we're all yelling at Alan, stop, stop, stop. He couldn't hear us, and he couldn't see what was going on either. So there was John, sort of in midair, and eventually
so you've got to wonder why we kept on coming. Things like that kept on us motivated to come in, because it was. I learned an awful lot. It took me through. Why did we keep on coming? The Festiniog, the Seven Valley were too far to go to lend a hand, I think. Oswestry was going nowhere at the moment, so Foxcote eventually came here. The engine. This was the thing to be involved in, and we decided. And the people off the Wirral were part of the Wirral Railway Circle, so we knew them from within that society, and we gravitated down. But it's a bit strange to think we've been in nearly 50 years. That is the odd thing, I
think what developed was camaraderie. The conditions we worked in were appalling. We had no cover. When it rained and it snowed, we were still working out there, and we built up a bond. We were all in it together. And I think alongside the camaraderie was the satisfaction of seeing another panel of track go down. We did that. We come from all sorts of different backgrounds, but we've gelled to produce a length of track or a turnout, and to see the track extending was a bit of a drug in a way. You wanted to come back and do a bit more next week and a bit more the week after, and
I think that when it started to snowball really was when we started running trains people could ride on. And the first ones were 50p for a ride up the cutting here, but that first Sunday we took £750, I think it was. It was a huge sum of money. Well, then we had a very good committee which said, well, we're not buying that, but they could allocate funds to where we needed it to push the project forward. And we've been very lucky in that respect. It's probably taken 20 years longer than it should have done. We should have been up there 20 years at Corwin, 20 years, but then that wasn't just our own fault. That was, I nearly said interference, that was trying to placate the powers who owned the land, the landlord, the county council. It was not simple in what we tried to do.
But we were a family, we were a small unit. We were concentrated in a small geographical area, so we all knew one another. Management were hands-on. We had Bill Shakespeare doing ballasting, Don Hop was the general manager, Alan's father. They were committed, and they turned up every week, and I don't know how they did it, because it was hard graft, both in terms of the time that they devoted to the railway and the physical efforts. But our S&T engineer at the time, Mike Ellis, bless him, who's now passed away, he'd turn up and give us a hand, and it was just one all for one for all, basically. And if they needed any help putting in blocks for the signalling or whatever, we'd give them a hand.
And it was a family, because my employment, I worked on the Wirral, and then I was redundant. Where did I go to get a job? It was a time of Norman Tebbit. Get on your bike. Well, I got on the train. So I was in London. I still volunteered because every second week I came home from London. I drive here. I went home to the Wirral first, and then came here on a Saturday, overnight here, and on Sunday, somebody'd run me back to Llangollen Station to get home to London to start work the next day. We looked out for one another as a group of lads. A very strong bond, really. The ones who and we weren't all of the same age group. There were different age groups. And where did people work? Rossi was in the Navy, on warships, you know. And I can see him now. I won't be here next week. I'm in Rosyth or somewhere. You know, okay. It certainly, there was a nucleus of people who did not leave. Didn't matter what happened, whether it was good or bad, upsets for family, there's upsets, you know, did not leave. They stuck with the project. And the nice thing is, Peter, as we know, quite a few of them are still here with the project, even today. And the ones who sadly have passed, we remember them.
They won't be forgotten.
With great affection.
They won't be forgotten.
You know,
As John said, we had people of all ages, and I used to bring schoolboys from Chester. Kevin Hughes, classic. He was at school, and he was dead keen on carriage and wagon. I would pick him up Manning's Lane in Chester and bring him down here. He could have only been about 14, 15, something like that. But he's still in touch. He lives in Peebles in Scotland.
He was here.
And his son was here.
He was here 2 weeks ago.
A couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So, you know, they may not be with us physically, but they're with us in spirit. And they still keep in touch. Another lad was Eamon Holmes from Elvid School in Buckley. I used to bring him down, and it was a question of who we could get, who was interested to help us, because, as is the case now, we never had enough people. But the key really was that achievement of getting to Pentrevellin within the 5 years. In fact, we overran the 5 years by a little bit, but Clwyd County Council could see that we were serious. Now, we were a bit of an unknown with Clwyd County Council. When this site was available for development, it could have gone one of two ways. There was some developers who wanted to build a riverside hotel,
Trust House 40,
and there was us that wanted to build a railway. Now, from Clwyd County Council's point of view, the safe bet would have been the hotel, because what track record, pardon the pun, of these bunch of people wanted to relay a railway, what sort of success rate have they got? They've got no experience, and it could have been an unmitigating disaster. So Clwyd County voted on it, and the vote was won by one vote in favour of the railway. It was that close. I think it was sort of 7-6 in favour of the railway. And getting to Pentrevellin and running a service was the key that unlocked the rest of the future of the railway, because we proved we could do it, and that gave Clwyd County Council the confidence to extend our lease to 21 years. And then subsequently, I believe it's been extended to 99 now. So we're here for the foreseeable future. And we always set out to build a railway to Corwin. That was always in the original concept.
And I think, why did we keep on coming? Well, when you get up the cutting, you can look left or right. You're looking at beautiful scenery. The further you go, you imagine getting over the Dee Bridge and looking at the scenery there, you know, and thinking, wow, you know, it drew you in up at the tunnel, but Deeside Loop, and it's stunning. The countryside is absolutely stunning. There's not many preserved railways in the UK that can match us for scenery. The Festino maybe, you know, but yeah, the Welsh Island. Yeah. But this was absolutely stunning. That's what kept us coming.
The other point is that once we'd got that operational railway, it attracted the interest of others, and Derek Foster is one in mind. He brought his Ginty in 1983. Now, we'd been operating a 060 industrial Kitson for that period of time, and I mean, it got us off the ground, and we'll be forever grateful to Austin One. But for a lot of people, a mainline or ex-mainline steam engine was the thing to have. And Derek had just recently restored his Ginty, hadn't he? And he came down and said, "Yeah, okay, can I? You got a length of track? Can I come down and bring my engine?" Which he did, and he brought people with him, and that again produced an added interest to the general public out there. Oh, we've got a mainline engine, ex-mainline engine, and Mark 1 carriages by then, and Derek chugging up and down in his Ginty was another catalyst for further expansion. Meanwhile, we were still working ahead, going up the Berwyn Bank, but not only that, these materials had to come from somewhere. We couldn't afford them, so various organisations, when they had no longer use for them, donated them to us, and we ended up going everywhere. Chelford near Macclesfield was one. We did three weekends there lifting concrete sleepers. Sandycroft, Sellafield, nuclear fuels. Our then commercial manager, Peter Jackson, was an employee there, and he managed to persuade British Nuclear Fuels to relinquish those sleepers. And in fact, we stayed overnight, didn't we? And British Nuclear Fuels paid for it all. So we've had a fair few adventures away from the railway. And again, you have to ask the question: why did we do it? You know, why did we spend all these weekends away in strange places?
What motivated us to do it? Yeah, you're quite right. Looking back now, could I have spent 50 years doing something else? Yeah, flipping well good. I'm sure I could. Yeah. Would have I had as much fun?
Yeah. I mean, what gels us, I think, is the adversity as well as the success. I mean, there's been a lot of adversity.
Let's take the section, say, from the D Bridge to Berwyn Station as an example. The track bed was there. There was even a signal on the track bed, a distance signal. But the track bed needed clearing because it had 20 plus years of no one there, vegetation. It was like the jungle up there, like the Amazon. First of all, we came through and chopped the trees down. Then we had massive bonfires to get rid of the wood that was there. Once that was chopped down, the next thing to do was scarivate the track bed to get it sort of semi-level. And then what material did we have to lay the track down? So whatever materials, and we were sort of accumulating stuff by then. It was all donated. We don't think we bought much stuff at all.
I think a lot of the concrete sleepers from Chelford went on the bank. Yeah,
I don't know whether they're still there or not. They might be. I'm not sure.
Might well be.
But anyway, that's we've got our gear together for the laying, stockpiled in one place. And then we go up with a works train. And we had a crane at that stage that could actually lift the sleepers off, swing them around, place them in there, and make a panel of track. We'd then get the crane to lift the rails in, and then we'd connect up the rails to the sleepers. And that was 60 foot more of the track done. The problem we had at Berwyn was you needed space to actually run the engine round the train. So on the tunnel side of the station, it's wide enough. I don't know why it was built that way, but it's wide enough for a second track.
Get a loop in.
So we built a loop. But I guess that would take a year to progress that from the D Bridge. And we didn't even bother with laying track correctly on the D Bridge. We left it with temporary track until we got... Was they contractors to come in and do it? I can't remember now.
Well, the problem was always ballast. We never had enough ballast, and we did remove ballast from further up the line. Bonham was one of them. We'd go up to Bonham, we'd get a contractor with a JCB and load a lorry up, we'd get it second-hand second-hand ballast from other places, and if you remember, Don Hotwood got a screening machine in,
Yes,
which he brought from probably Bersham Colliery and erected in the yard, and lorry loads of this second-hand ballast would come in, and it would be passed through grids and graded, and all the rubbish that we didn't want, like sort of fine grain stuff and soil, was removed out, and the decent stuff that was left was loaded into, I think we had a hopper wagon at the
Shelton
Steelworks,
with bent axles,
and we kept derailing, but that was used to get the ballast up there. But it was always a difficult place to get to.
When we took stone from Bonham, especially, they drove onto the track bed. The lorries were then loaded by the digger. Then they had to back out onto the A5. Not a very good place at the bottom.
On that corner,
sharp bend on that corner.
Double bend.
But we borrowed a stop and go board. Where it came from, I have no idea. But we'd set John Knockin to stand there. And even the police came up and stopped and just waved when they went past.
We had no authority to do that whatsoever.
No, we just did it.
We weren't qualified or trained.
Yeah.
But
no risk assessments, and
this was the pragmatic approach.
But it got the job done.
Yeah.
And it got us the stone to where we needed it, so we could actually build the railway. But it's only in later years did we get more mechanised that. And we'd actually purchased rail. I'm quite sure then. It's only recently we purchased brand new rail from Scunthorpe. But as I say, I think that the other thing was we had engineers who were very good at organising people and organising the kit that we needed, and were quite personable as well in the way that they drew people into the gang.
But once we'd completed the loop at Berwyn and we were operating, John Stowell appeared on the scene, and he took the track laying to another level. He was highly organised.
John
he had his connections, and
he was a senior signal and telegraph engineer based in Chester. John.
Yeah,
he was the signalling manager for that. So he brought a load of experience, but he also dragged in other people. His brother, who was a P-Way engineer, Steve, came to assist. So as they brought in people themselves, the job became not so much easier as more readily available to complete. And it's sort of.
Didn't he have a chap? Was it Dolbin who had a lorry and
still using it? He's retired now.
Yeah, they then started bringing stuff in from the Glyndufty end, didn't they? Yeah. Rather than cart it all up from.
You've got to think about the tunnel. There was no track in the tunnel. We had to lay the track in the tunnel. In fact, I've been up there the fourth time I've been in now laying track in the tunnel. But to actually get it organised, we built back from D-side loop at that stage. So we took materials up to D-side, and the materials were ferried in from the tunnel mouth. So you would have a wagon loaded with rail in the yard here, taken up to the tunnel mouth. You had a tractor dragged it off and dragged two rails through at a time through the tunnel towards D-side, all the way back. And then he came along with the sleepers, and the sleepers were on a forklift truck and driven through and placed where we needed them. Then the gang went in and actually worked in the tunnel. Which has been some of the most interesting work I've ever done down here on the P-Way, is actually in the tunnel, because of the environment you're in. And you can't see the other end. There's a bend at the D-side end, so it had to be artificial light. There was all sorts involved. It was quite incredible, really, that the job was accomplished as easily as it was, because it was easy.
And significantly, we didn't have any injuries. Now, we never did risk assessments. Health and safety was just non-existent. I turned up in flared jeans and trainers, and yes, I did wear gloves, and that was about it. We very rarely wore high vis. we just turned up as though we were, you know, off the street, so to speak. No formal risk assessment or method statement, just didn't exist. Now, of course, you'd have to go through the whole
gamut. There was no briefings for people who were there at the, you know, now then, lads, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, this is, you know. The last time I was on the D bridge, we had a debrief and they gave me, what, 3 words for an emergency?
Yeah.
You know, we're doing this and blah, 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 and the phone's here and the first aid kit's there. I'm thinking, yeah, we've progressed along that. But 50 years ago, it didn't exist.
No. And I don't recall us ever having a first aid kit on site at all. And you know, I think people did get stung by bees and wasps and so on, but there was never, thankfully, a serious
Certainly
injury.
The tunnel, Project X going west, it was called. What they asked for, we had a full brake coach, and they wanted to take it up there, and they said we'd like to encourage people to come and keep them on site. So they're not coming back to Llangollen to go to the sandwich shop or whatever, you know. Can we provide meals in the coach? So they got it together, and my wife was one of them who they persuaded to come down and actually put a cooker in there. And if it was we didn't do 2 sittings, but we certainly got up to, I don't know, a dozen people, 18, I don't know, who had served of a Saturday, a nice Saturday lunch, and we went back on the Sunday. Breakfast, lunch, and afternoon tea was served up. So the lorry would come out and would get loaded up with trays of stuff, and they'd take them, they'd come back, and we began to get a bit of a reputation of, you want something to eat, go and see them at the tunnel mouth. They're quite good up there. Well, they came up with an engine once, Austin one, and we told them to go away because we hadn't got enough food to provide for our own and that. But we actually fed people, and that was one thing that kept people, when it was quite awkward job to do, it persuaded them to turn up because they were going to get fed. Because we're all single lads, you know, couldn't, you know.
You couldn't do it married. Not the hours and days we put in. Your marriage wouldn't have lasted very long. But it was a unique time, wasn't it? Where maybe a dozen, 14 single lads in their 20s with an affinity to railways turned up.
And we had,
and that's never happened since on this railway.
And we had John Stowell had a little red van. I forgot what type of van it was. I can't remember.
Like a Fiat or something.
Anyway, it was nicknamed the Sooty van.
Daihatsu. I think it was a Daihatsu.
Anyway, that went up and down the tunnel. Of course, the other mad thing we did do before we laid rails completely through the tunnel was we had a transport extravaganza event here, and at the end of it, people said, we were running up to Berwyn then, what are we going to do? And I said, or somebody else, can we persuade the bus driver, the Crosshill bus, to take it into the tunnel? So I took this guy up there to the tunnel mouth, the bus driver, and he said, I can't turn round, but what we can do, he said, is we'll reverse it into the tunnel. We'll get pictures of it coming out, which is how we get this. There's a picture, I've got copies, of a bus coming out of the Berwyn Tunnel with people sat inside with their Barmouth on the front or something. I don't know, whatever. You know, but it was quite ridiculous, really. That was the fun thing of doing. You're working very hard. Now, all right, the bus in the tunnel, you know. And it's the one time I saw Fred Tonks laugh. It was in the middle of the tunnel, ding ding on the bus bell, and off he drove with the tunnel. And he actually burst out laughing. I'd never seen him laugh before. I didn't see him laugh since. He's not around anymore, is he, friend? You know. So there you go. That's it.
And then 40 years on, we're doing the same thing at Corwin. Only this time it's more sophisticated. We have a RRV, road railer, and more mechanisation, and the machines do the work. I mean, we're physically incapable, I think, of lifting, crossing timbers and so on, but you don't have to do it now. And when it's laid, you bring in a tamper. I mean, we used to do it with shovels to start with.
Jack the track up, get the level right, and then get your shovel out and bang it in with the shovel.
Ram the stone in
on the sleepers.
And then to get the track ready for the inspector, Office of Rail and Road, or wasn't that then?
No,
was
the Rail Inspectorate.
Rail Inspectorate, yeah. We brought in Kango hammers to make sure that the stone was tightly packed underneath the sleepers, and they were horrible things to use, and you were only allowed to use them for 20 minutes at a time because you ran the risk of getting
the funny thing about that, getting the railway passed for passenger trains to rise, was that the links of people, we had Major Oliver, right, and then we had
Les Abbott.
Les Abbott. It was our guy was he was
Reverend McGregor Pearson.
The Reverend McGregor Pearson
was
who knew them, because the Reverend McGregor Pearson had been the civil engineer in Oswestry for the Cambrian line, so they knew each other. So when Reverend McGregor said this track is good for these lads have laid to run train, passengers said you can run passenger trains, and that I think again it was links like that assisted us. That we were able to, and
we knew what the sort of standard was that was required, and you knew that if you didn't meet that standard you wouldn't get the nod. And I remember walking up with Les Abbott doing a track survey with Alan, and he was pointing out certain things, nothing major, but just tweak that a little bit and do that a little bit, and I'll come back. You're probably good enough to run now, so but I'll come back in a few weeks' time just to make sure you've carried out all the elements of the job that I think you need to do to bring it up to standard. And it was an interesting experience when we were required to do a test run with Les Abbott on board, and we had Austin 1, 2 Suburbans and a Toad, and a bell system. So the Toad was connected to the footplate with electric wires and a 12-volt battery, and I was the guard on the first public train, and I think we had a series of 3 calls. One was slow down, maybe 2 was to stop, and 3 bells was to go, and that's how we did it. It was push pull, so they propelled up to Goods Junction and then took the train back. And when I got onto the platform at Llangollen, a couple of the passengers were a bit disappointed. They said, "Well, is that it?" At the moment, yes, it is, but if you like, you can go up again for nothing. There's a bit of a PR stunt, but
I suppose, looking back now, the way these things came together and gelled to make the railway that we know today, I don't think when we just had one length of track in the platform and Austin 1 sat there, anyone could have envisaged Gordon Francis, for a start, that he was here driving an A4, which was his favourite engine, on his railway here at Llangollen. You couldn't envisage that.
No.
You couldn't envisage we had Flying Scotsman here, City of Truro,
Clan Line, Britannia, Tornado.
Yeah,
we had Tornado here, didn't we?
There's no way you could envisage this was going to happen in the future.
No.
And yes, we've been through some rough times. The receivership, whatever you want to call it, but somehow we seem to have survived.
Against the odds, but we have a knack of pulling through, and long may that continue.
But thinking about the glamour side of it, those who like driving these engines and bleeding off look at me, I'm a fireman on a black fighter. It's fantastic. Good luck to them. I'm not in the slightest bit interested. It was building the railway that was for me, and that was our team, and that was what we did, and that's what we have achieved.
Yeah.
And certainly the locos is just unreal. Considering that we've no connection with the main line at Ruapen, you have to bring them in by road.
Mm.
It is quite staggering what's happened over the years.
Yeah, but I mean, it wasn't just permanent way, was it? We got into wagon restoration, and in my case, driving, and while I was driving, I couldn't be building track, so that side of the project took a back seat while I was on the footplate. And yeah, I did drive the engines. I drove Odney Manor, I drove Foxcote, but on the footplate, the best job in the world was fireman. You had so much to be looking at, you know, your water and your fire and so on. And sometimes it'd clinker up and you'd have to get your irons out and start banging out the clinker. And that was the challenge. Driving was as boring as as anything. I'm going to use something else then. But it had to be done because that was our income. I had runs to Deeside, Holt and back, and the worst part undoubtedly was going through the tunnel. It was awful in terms of the atmospheric conditions. You go through 3 times one way and 3 times back. By the end of the day, your lungs were absolutely raw with due to the acidic smoke. No matter what you did, you could put a handkerchief over your face, you could kneel on the footplate, as sometimes we did. But with the chimney being so close to the top of the tunnel arch, all the gases just came cascading around and down the side, and the firebox would suck them in again because of the blast from the chimney, and you'd be encased almost in this horrible acidic environment. And by the end of the day, it was grim. But they still do it today, you know. So
I guess for me, the biggest achievement is I'm still here, turning up and volunteering. But I think the biggest achievement is we actually completed the project. We actually got to Corwin, against all the odds and against a lot of sometimes backbiting and you know, interference, and we've actually managed to do it. And the project was huge. In fact, the project got bigger. The nearer we got to Corwin, the bigger the project became. Because if you think of the actual construction of the station, 10 years. It was quite easy laying the track. The most track we've ever laid that I can remember in a single day was from towards Bridge 28, up from Bonham towards Corwin, and we laid 10 lengths of track in a single day. It's 600 feet. We didn't stop for lunch. We were moving people around. You go and have some to eat, and have someone to dive in and do his job. That was a huge achievement. But the biggest achievement was actually completing the station and all that was involved at Corwin, because it's not simple. I mean, it's not just a station, because you've got a chairlift for a start. You've got to have emergency access and things like that. You know, it's a nightmare. To stand on the outside and people say, no, we've organised this, dive in and do that. I think that's the biggest achievement, is to actually have seen the completion of the railway from Llangollen to Corwin. That's the biggest achievement for me, anyway.
Yeah, and I would concur. We're fortunate to still be here after 50 years, and the challenges that we faced, the adversity, as John has said, Corwin Station itself was a massive project built by volunteers whose average age was 68, and there was only ever 8 of us there on any given day. We worked in all weathers. It wasn't just the physical construction, but there were other things, and this is where I got involved, getting permission to run our sewer pipe into the network. That took me 3 years. I had 4 legal departments to deal with, and it was a nightmare. Also getting a water supply, potable water supply to the station, that was easier than the sewer. But we've got an abstraction license here. I managed to get one in perpetuity in 1975. 1979. So they can't take that away from us. So we've got permission to take water out of the river forever and a day for as long as we're here. So, there's so many things behind the scenes, but still being here after 50 years is the main, main area of pride that I have. And also on a sort of slightly smaller note, back in the early days, Alan Hopwood was a fellow of the Permanent Way Institute, as was the Reverend McGregor Pearson, and they both asked me if I would be prepared to apply for a fellowship of the Permanent Way Institution, and they both agreed to sponsor me. And in 1979 I became a fellow of the Permanent Way Institute, which is something of an area of personal pride, because I'd never done permanent way work before. It was totally alien, and yet I got to a degree of competency that was recognised by that award. So all in all, very satisfying. And if we go on to biggest regret, undoubtedly the fact that the early members of the team are no longer with us, and I will single out Alan Hopwood, Graham Ross, John Jones. They were brilliant. They were an integral part of the team, and it's so sad that they are not around to see the ultimate achievement of getting into Corwin. But their spirit's there. Undoubtedly, their spirit is there. It's embodied in that station. Yeah,
it is nice to know that I can care with Peter as to the greatest regret. Yeah, it's the guys who've gone. That they were here. They did huge amounts of of work involved. Yeah. They were great people to work with. They were great friends, and even up to the end when Phil Carson's death. It was involved deeply in the Corwin project. Hit me quite hard, actually. So I think the regrets are the people who've gone before us, and they were super people. They really were. Can't think of a bad word to say about any of them.
No, not at all.
Yeah, so that's that.
Yeah. And what was the final?
Yeah, just your the people you'd like to remember. You've said.
As I say,
one thing you mentioned is about who you admire. You mentioned about more of the team.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Lead into that.
It's difficult.
Who do we admire? All of them. Whoever turned up to do a day's work assisted the project, even if they only turned up the once. They assisted the project. But I can think of things that when I was talking about the tunnel mess, my wife, we lived in London. She came up every second weekend and cooked for them. Then went back and worked in a very busy hospital in North London. The dedication there, for a start, was incredible.
It is almost impossible to single out one person.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
I wouldn't single out one person, but people that have made massive contributions are the likes of Bill Shakespeare. What he did behind the scenes, dealing with the outside bodies, was just off the scale. And I think before he passed away, he had about 4 filing cabinets of documents that he'd acquired over the years. Likes of Alan Terry, our secretary for a long time, he put a lot of effort in. Another chap who doesn't get mentioned very often is Mike Lawrence. He sort of kick-started the development of the railway in a big way by borrowing money and saying, right, okay, well, to get to the next objective, we want to do it in a timely fashion, so I'll borrow some money and we'll get the materials. And he sacrificed a lot, and I won't go into detail, but he sacrificed a lot to to push us along. And say the likes of Tony Warren, who was general manager for a while, dare I say it, Nigel Dickinson, who was a permanent way engineer,
Yes.
a very colourful character, shall we say, but he was a can-do man. Bob Maxwell,
Bob Maxwell, of course,
Dave Owen, they've all played their part. I think probably the one who's put as much in as anybody would be Bill Shakespeare, because we didn't see all that he did, but we know from what he said and the meetings he'd been to and the discussions he'd had with the various powers that be, it was phenomenal. It really was. But no, I've got to say it's a collective effort. End of.
There are people who stand out. Bill is one.
Yeah.
Who stands out. Say Bob Maxwell. You know, but they're well, Bill's only recently really passed away, hasn't he? A couple of years. Yeah, a couple of years. They all collectively pushed this railway forward in quite different ways. Some of them, you know, but Bill was behind the scenes always.
Yeah. You didn't see him for weeks on end, but you know he'd been.
But he would be
extremely
He
involved.
wasn't a young man then. He'd be down the track with a shovel with us. You know, no problem at all.
And
in fact, I've got a photograph of him wearing a plastic bag on his hat. It's that wet.
Yeah.
You know,
and he had an estate which he slept in the yard.
Yeah.
And there was one occasion where he had what we thought was peritonitis or an appendicitis, and I think we had to get him to hospital. But you know, his commitment to the railway was phenomenal.
It wouldn't have been developed or been built if he hadn't been there.
If you've got a good leader, you're prepared to follow. That's key to success of any project. If you have a leader that you respect and admire, you will follow them. John Mason, for all his idiosyncrasies, he kept turning up day in, day out. He had good civil engineering knowledge, and you would be prepared to go and help him without question, really. When he said, you know, I need half a dozen lads to do this, you do it. He led by example, and that encouraged you to follow suit. And it's a key element of good management is to have a can-do person who sets the example, and Bill certainly did that, and a lot of other people did. And dare I say it, if I felt that someone was not pulling their weight, I'd say, well, why should I bother? But if you've been fortunate, we've had a lot of people like that, you will follow, and you're more than happy to devote your free time and a lot of your money, because it's not cheap coming here, you know, 3 times a week or whatever, and that's part and parcel of being part of a good cohesive team. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.